Okay, so for today's class or lecture, we actually are going to focus on sleep. So I want you to take a minute and think about how much sleep you get on an average school night. Now, this is not a silly question. Sleep is super, super important and tends to be one of the things that we all neglect the most. So I want you to take a moment and think about if you actually do get 8 hours of sleep as recommended each night. Most students that I know will say that they do not. So let's talk a little bit about sleep. All right, today we're going to look at the different stages of sleep, and you also will be analyzing an article in your packets about sleep. All right, so we're going to start by talking about why we sleep. So as you know, sleep is necessary and vital for survival. And it comes from an evolutionary thing. So we tended to be tucked away from predators when it was dark so that we wouldn't get eaten. It helps restore our health and efficiency. I'm not sure if you've ever been told, oh, if you don't get enough rest, you're going to get sick. I know this is something that's really big in my family, talking about that connection between getting enough sleep and your overall general health. There are some theories that say that sleep helps us consolidate the information. It helps us process through the things that we have gone through during the day. And it also helps us process any stress through dreaming. So that is one of the theories of dreaming, is that it helps us process through the stresses that we've experienced. Similar to my last set of notes, I'm going to be going a little bit quicker than I would in class. So feel free to pause this video if necessary if you are writing notes down. Let's go ahead next and talk about our circadian rhythm. The circadian rhythm is a fancy way of just saying our wake and our sleep cycles. So in 24 hours, it's our biological patterns of how we are awake and how we are sleeping. Usually your natural circadian rhythm is about 16 hours awake and 8 hours asleep. However, I know for most of you, you're not getting 8 hours of sleep. I know for myself, I'm not getting 8 hours of sleep. So this may be a little bit off. You may have heard someone tell you that you're going to throw off your circadian rhythm if you do things like stay up incredibly late on a weekend and then have trouble waking up on a Monday, and then you're kind of all thrown off during the day. So you go home at 4 o'clock and you fall asleep for a nap, and then you wake up at 10 p.m. So all of those habits where we may stay up extremely late at one point or get up very early can throw off our overall circadian rhythm. So you should be mindful of that. Okay, so let's talk about our overall wake-sleep cycle. Essentially, we receive environmental cues that signal to our brain that it's time to go to sleep. This typically comes from our ability to perceive nighttime because daylight just lessens. We'll talk a little bit about rods and cones, which are parts of our eye and cells in our retina. They detect the daylight and communicate with something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is a fancy way for saying our body's master clock. So our master clock gets this information from our eyes that it's getting darker out and it's time to go to sleep, and it sends out melatonin. Melatonin will ultimately make us feel sleepy. That's why if someone is having trouble sleeping, they may take a melatonin supplement, like a vitamin, in order to kind of make sure that you are able to fall asleep. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but melatonin is tied with our sleep cycle. When we talk specifically about our sleep cycle, here are the stages. We have sleep onset. It's just when you are falling asleep. Stage 1 will enter non-REM sleep. REM standing for rapid eye movement. Stage 1 is when we are lightly asleep. We are not yet in that deep dreaming, can't be woken up type stage. Stage 2, call it a slow wave speech, and this is where if you are someone who talks in your sleep, you may be doing that in stage 2. Stage 3 sleep is when our brains will send out delta waves, and it really is hard for us to awaken from this deep sleep because now we're like really in the thick of sleep. Then we'll hit the REM stage, the rapid eye movement stage. Our brain waves move like we are awake, and this is where we dream, is in REM sleep. Ultimately, we will repeat this sleep cycle throughout the entire time, ideally those 8 hours that we are sleeping. I'm going to show you on the next slide the graph that we associate with the sleep cycle, just to kind of show you how people dip in and out of these different stages. And here is your graph. All right, lastly and briefly, we're going to talk about good sleep habits. These are probably things that you already know and things that your parents or maybe your teachers have recommended to you. But really, if we're talking about establishing good sleep habits, which is kind of ironic given that I'm out on maternity leave with a newborn who's most likely not sleeping, you want to establish a regular schedule. Consistency is key here. You want to avoid stimulants like caffeines about 6 hours before bed. Unless, of course, you're someone who is caffeine sensitive, then you want to maybe avoid it a little bit sooner. I know this might be hard for some of you because I know students in the past have said to me, I like to go home and take a nap before I start my homework, but it really is not recommended to take naps after 3 p.m. Use your bedroom only for sleeping. Again, might also be hard. They say no large meals before bed, and then to sleep in a dark and a cool room. So I'm not sure how many of you actually do any of these things, but these are recommended by doctors and psychologists in order to maintain good sleep patterns. All right, that's all I've got for you for sleep. And I hope you're not too sleepy after listening to these sets of notes. Thank you.